The Sierra is home to 3 national parks and many more national forests, and while reading about this area in older newspapers, I came across a number of unusual disappearances that I wanted to share with you. Let's start with 12-year-old David Fargo, who disappeared in early July of 1931 while on a fishing trip with his father in the Sierra Nevada of California. Specifically, they were going to fish the Stanislaus River inside the Stanislaus National Forest, which in turn isn't actually very far away from Yosemite National Park. On this day, David and his father travelled to Donnelly's Flat, which is an area along the Stanislaus River. An area which he had visited many times with his dad, but this time would be different. It seems that they weren't getting many bites this day, and at noon, David had enough and wanted to return to their camp. The father wasn't quite finished yet, so David returned alone. When his father later returned, David was nowhere to be seen. He had a look in the surrounding areas of the camp, but there was no David. When David didn't appear by night, the father notified authorities. Numerous individuals have joined the search. The entire country, for miles around, will be combed carefully by hundreds of searchers. Niagara Creek, 65 miles east of Sonora, is a rough, mountainous country, and fear was expressed that the boy had been injured or had fallen over a cliff. Fear also was felt that he may have been bitten by a rattlesnake, many having been reported in that district. It's important to highlight here that the pair had set up camp at this exact location numerous times in the past, and it was felt that despite his age, David did have a lot of familiarity with this area. This led to questions and speculation in regards to whether or not he was simply lost or if something entirely different had happened here. It seems that there were a number of people present who believed that he may not have been in the area anymore, but given that it was a very rural area that was completely out of the way, authorities felt it was unlikely. Then, this was stated. Hope that David would be found alive was revived today when definite tracks of the boy were discovered in the High Sierra east of Sonora, in which he disappeared. 100 searchers who have been looking for the lad have been called into the camp at Niagara, and 7 experienced trackers were following the boy's trail. The searchers were rounded up as a means of preventing possible obliteration of the tracks left by the boy. The lost boy, it was indicated by the tracks he left, climbed 2,000 feet out of the Stanislaus River Canyon and slept Sunday night in Eagle Meadows. His tracks led eastward, and it is believed he was heading for an area in which there were several cattle herders' camps. The search for David after this point was truly remarkable. It grew in size, and they constantly had planes over the area scouting for him. They had a brilliant idea that I've not personally seen done before in these searches. Using these planes, they dropped letters telling David that they were looking for him, that they were going to find him, and that he needed to stay out in the open and build a fire. David, missing in a district with which he was very familiar. It is believed the boy was injured while making his way out of the Stanislaus River Canyon or was drowned in the river. A searching party of 100 men continued their work today, but unbeknown to the parents, are spending most of their time at the river, looking into eddies and poking at the piles of driftwood or sniffing the air for a scent they dread. What's interesting about this is they had definitive signs of David, and they brought in police dogs among other search dogs from the search and rescue groups, but the tracks didn't lead anywhere and petered out. The searchers simply saying that the trail had gone cold. The dogs also didn't find his scent in the area. That was anyway until the following day when they returned to the area with the tracks and they tried again with the dogs. Here's the headline. Dogs find trail of missing boy. The 2 police dogs brought from Oakland to aid in the search were reported late today to have picked up the lad's trail and to be following it rapidly. However, it appears that once more the trail was lost. Hope for the safety of David, who vanished Saturday, was practically abandoned today. 3 planes continued to fly over the district. 2 bloodhounds continued their search, and 75 men tramped through ravines and up and down slopes, but with little hope. The dogs were unable to pick up any tracks, although a place was found under a tree where it is thought that the boy might have slept earlier. Now, the following day, a cattleman named Joe Ratton, who was working in the area, reported hearing a loud yet faint shout, but he couldn't identify where it was coming from. Knowing that David was lost in this general area, he immediately reported this to the authorities, who thereby came in force once more with trained mountaineers. Again, they found nothing and never heard anything else. 3 days after this, the search would be abandoned. Now, let's get bizarre. 4 days after the abandonment of the search, 2 weeks after going missing, David's body would be found 200 feet, or 66 yards away from the point of his disappearance at the fishing site. This area, of course, had been heavily searched all throughout the effort, but they never found him, and the dogs never found a scent here. 2 searchers reported to the coroner's office that they found David's body wedged under a rock in the stream, 200 feet from where the lad left his father to return alone to their camp. That was basically the end of the paper trail. Law enforcement came to the conclusion that David must have slipped and fell, but there were people with other thoughts surrounding this disappearance too. Some found it odd that right after the search had been abandoned, there he was, found in an area that was searched constantly for weeks. I'm not sure what the implication is specifically, but given that, it does seem that some may have felt that there was a third party involved in placing David there. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any further articles on this, so do share your thoughts. Now, let's move on to the next disappearance. Teddy Thompson was 4 years old when he disappeared from a rural area of California at the end of January in 1938. Specifically, Teddy lived with his parents between 10 and 15 miles north of Covelo, in an area bordering the Mendocino National Forest. The first I heard of Teddy was while scouring older newspapers, and I found this reported by the Edwardsville Intelligencer on the 1st of February 1938. Native American trackers and manhunting dogs were employed today in the search for Teddy, who strayed from home into the mountains Saturday afternoon, leaving a trail of bare footprints that ceased where they crossed those of a large mountain lion. Now, I know what you're thinking, case closed. Well, the sheriff and some of the trackers working under him didn't think so. Sheriff E.L. Williams announced today he was investigating the possibility that 4-year-old Teddy Thompson, missing for 3 days in the Mendocino Mountains near Covelo, was the victim of foul play. I am not satisfied with the theory that the boy merely wandered away from home, or that he was the victim of a wild animal, said Sheriff Williams. So the gist of this is that there were trackers present who were of the opinion that the mountain lion tracks had been made much earlier than Teddy's, meaning that it was his belief that the two had not crossed paths. The sheriff seems to have taken that position too. Now, whether that was just trying to come from a place of hope, or whether the trackers were actually correct is unclear, but that was the position of some present. There were 200 men in the search, including several Native Americans of the Round Valley Reservation who were more familiar than the woodsmen with the mountain trails and the ways of the wild animals that frequent them. The prints of the lion and the barefoot boy ran parallel for a short ways. Then they met and the boy's trail ended. The lion tracks continued into the wilderness. I'm not sure what other possibility there was here. The tracks go parallel with one another, then Teddy's come to an abrupt end while the lines continue. I think that some of the confusion came from the fact that there was no visible evidence of an attack. There was nothing present on the ground to insinuate a bite or something like that. I get the impression that they were expecting to find a trace of Teddy here somewhere along these tracks, but they didn't. Deputy Sheriff C.H. Lavelle had a conversation with the Native American trackers and relayed some information to the press. To condense it, it was stated that it's hard to believe that the lion would have attacked Teddy, saying that the lions were not hard pressed for food in the area as there were many deer and other game. They also stated that while unpredictable, the lions usually run away at the first scent of a human or dog. Search dogs were brought in who were given Teddy's scent, but they couldn't find it anywhere in the area. Alongside the dogs, over 200 men combed the area using grid searches, but they too found nothing. Unfortunately, the weather began to worsen too, which made the search much more difficult. The article then also gave us some vague details as to the moment of disappearance. Teddy's father, Charles, said, Teddy wandered out to play Saturday afternoon with two of the children. That evening, when he did not return, his father called for help at the ranger station across the river. It wasn't stated if Teddy made it to his friends or not, so it's not made clear in the paper if he disappeared before he met up with them or after he left them to go home. Whatever the case may be though, the deputy sheriff also stated this. It would have been impossible to stay alive 3 days under present weather conditions. Snow fell in this area today, covering both the footprints of the boy found near his parents' cabin and the parallel tracks of a mountain lion. Faint hope that Teddy is still alive was abandoned today by searchers. The boy was lightly clad when he vanished. I feel certain he perished in the bitter cold of the past 4 days. We will find his body sooner or later. The sheriff is investigating a theory of foul play, but would not reveal the basis for his belief. Okay, so the only other possible outcome here, including a third party that wasn't the lion, has to be something along these lines. If it's true that the mountain lion tracks were made at a much earlier time, that means that when Teddy approached the tracks, someone else took him and knew that the tracks converging in such a way would make it look like he was taken by the lion. I'm not sure how likely something like that actually is, but that seems to be the only basis I can see for the foul play hypothesis. There were never any other tracks made by a person mentioned though. Interestingly enough anyway, the mountain lion attack and foul play hypotheses both seem to have been disregarded in the end by the authorities. Sheriff Williams discarded a previous theory of the possibility of foul play. The sheriff returned from a wilderness search Wednesday night convinced that Teddy had wandered off into the wilderness where he would succumb to the elements. Williams went into the mountain wilderness to investigate the foul play possibility. When he got back to his office here, after a battle with storm conditions, he said there was nothing to the reports. Under the sheriff's direction, 2 deep wells around the Thompson cabin were searched without finding a trace of the missing boy. The sheriff was convinced that the child had run away from his home Saturday afternoon and had become lost in the thick brush of the area. Clad only in a sweater and overalls, barefooted, Teddy probably perished of exposure. I know that a lot of people are going to think that law enforcement were crazy here for seeming to discard the lion attack hypothesis. But if the information they were working with was that the tracks were made at different times, then you can see why perhaps they thought he'd walked away. However, realistically, that's hardly without its problems either, because then you have to ask, well, why did Teddy's tracks come to an abrupt end? If not the lion, what else caused them to stop? If someone else was there that took him at that moment, why did the perpetrator leave no tracks himself? Unfortunately, the weather worsened again for the second time during the search. A severe storm today blocked further search for Teddy. A group of more than 150 men who had been looking for the boy scattered. Snowdrifts and slides blocked the mountain roads and trails, and held a pack of lion hunting dogs at Covelo, which were to have been taken to the wilderness. The final word on this, at least from what I can find, came on the 9th of February 1938, around 2 weeks after his disappearance. After all of the wild clues of being taken and third-party involvement, and other lurid tales that have been pursued with attendant delay, metropolitan newspapermen who were sent in on the case suggested there was a possibility Teddy might have fallen into the stream running through the property of the Thompsons, and the waters at flood stage might have carried the body of the little boy downstream. This conclusion was, in the end, finally gone into carefully, and the celluloid ball with which little Teddy used to amuse himself, and with which he had with him when he was last seen, was found near the stream bank, and then, to add additional weight to the theory, the child may have fallen into the stream. A number of shreds of wool, matching the material in the sweater the little fellow had on the afternoon he disappeared from sight, were picked off a bush a short distance from where the boy's ball was picked up. I almost ended the segment on Teddy there, thinking that was the end of the paper trail, but after going through everything again, I found further articles at the end of March, 2 months after he disappeared. 2 months ago, Teddy Thompson vanished from his mountain cabin home under circumstances which produced one of the greatest hunts in the history of this area. Monday, his body was found in the mountains where he perished. The body was found yesterday 2 miles from his home and within 20 feet of territory covered by the searching parties. 20 feet is 6 yards, so they were basically right on top of him during the search, which I suppose technically means that he was found in an area that had already been searched. Now, upon discovery, there was clear evidence of animal predation, but after examining the remains, it was felt that this predation had occurred after his passing. The sheriff and officers present were convinced that young Teddy had passed away due to freezing. Constable Charles Lavelle said he was convinced Teddy had passed away due to freezing and was not carried off by a lion. In the end, I suppose no one will ever truly know what happened to Teddy, and I'd like to hear your closing thoughts on this one too. What happened here? Do you think Teddy was taken by a mountain lion? Was it some other kind of third party? Was it down to exposure? It seems that we can be confident in discounting the falling into a body of water hypothesis. Personally, I was leaning towards the mountain lion because I'm not sure why the tracks would just suddenly stop. But if the tracks weren't made at the same time, then I just don't know. I suppose with that, now is a good time to end this video and hand it over to you in the comments below. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around and disappearing on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day, or evening, depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe guys. Peace.